But in war, crew survival was often a matter of millimeters of steel. German and Soviet armor on the outside looked the same, but inside they were two completely different worlds. Some focused on road hardness and alloying elements, additives, while others focused on balance. And today, I will tell you what really distinguished the armor of German and Soviet tanks. And most importantly, why some vehicles withstood hits while others, they cracked, even without being penetrated by a shell. And believe me, these are not pseudo-historical myths at all, but the real truth that was hidden in reports. Without unnecessary terminology, just the facts that decided the fate of tanks and people. This is Tall Vladimir. You are on War Channel 2. We are starting. The three main characteristics of a tank are protection, firepower, and mobility, and protection is provided primarily by armor. Among its most important qualities is hardness and toughness. The harder it is, the better it withstands a projectile hit. It's much harder to penetrate, but overdoing it is also not allowed, because overly hard armor becomes brittle. Also, if it's not penetrated, cracks may appear, and worse, from the inside, fragments may break off. Shrapnel hitting the crew is as dangerous as the one that penetrating inside by the shell. The armor is too tough to let shrapnel through, but it also absorbs the impact. Worse, on the inside surface, at best, dents form, and in the worst case, it breaks through. And the main task of engineers was how to find the optimal combination of these two qualities. In theory, everything is clear, but I want to show you with an example what solid but brittle armor looks like and how it behaves itself when hit by a projectile. And here is how brittle but ductile armor behaves. So, we figured this out, and now let's move further to something more interesting. Before moving on to the comparison of Soviet and German armor, which I will discuss shortly, I will quickly explain what types of armor existed at that time. I will try to do this without resorting to stuffy, complex terminology, and a detailed description of the chemical composition and production technologies of production, understandable only to a metallurgical engineer and a specialist with a very narrow focus. I really tried to explain this as simply as possible. But I don't have a teaching degree, so please write in the comments when you watch the video whether I managed in the end or not. Basically, all types belong to one of two kinds of armor: homogeneous and heterogeneous. Homogeneous armor has the same composition and properties. Heterogeneous armor has a non-uniform thickness. Its layers have different properties, and non-uniformity were obtained either by heat treatment of the surface layer, uniform armor, or by joining two layers of metal differing in composition. If we arrange these types in ascending order by durability, we get the following lineup: homogeneous cast, homogeneous rolled, heterogeneous rolled, surface hardening, and heterogeneous surface cementation of rolled steel. The easiest to obtain is the homogeneous one produced by casting armor, hardened through the entire depth to increase hardness. Low strength, cast homogeneous armor, cohesion, insufficient bonding between metal grains. Rolled homogeneous armor is obtained by rolling heated cast armor. Grains are compressed and stretched. The structure becomes fibrous. It is much stronger and harder to penetrate. Cutting across the grain is harder. The simplest example is a piece of wood. It is easier to cut along the grain than across it. The next step to improve the properties was quenching of the surface layer of rolled homogeneous armor. Rolled heterogeneous armor has a harder face layer, layers that can withstand strong projectile impacts and beyond, internal bonds that are less prone to the formation of secondary fragments. However, steel can only be hardened up to a certain limit. The harder it is, the more carbon it contains, but at the same time, it also becomes more fragile. Therefore, the final stage was cementation. Of course, construction cement has nothing to do with this, although there were also such ideas. I'll tell you about them sometime. The upper layers are additionally saturated with carbon for achieving maximum hardness after heat treatment, while leaving the internal structure ductile. This is how rolled heterogeneous cemented armor was developed. By the late 1920s, the most promising for armored vehicles, as considered specifically the heterogeneous armor. During the years of World War II, armor of all types was used. Moreover, it varied according to the infantry composition. We will discuss this later, but for now, about which types of armor and why Soviet and German engineers chose them. In the Soviet Union, for tank production, they used homogeneous cast rolled armor. The Germans mainly used homogeneous rolled and heterogeneous, with surface hardening. And, moreover, as the war progressed, the first type became the main one. Surprisingly, the reason for this was quite substantial, and basically similar. And Russia knew how to make cemented armor, even before the revolution. However, producing it in large quantities in the Soviet Union could not. This was mainly due to the industry's unpreparedness. The main enterprises producing armored rolled metal were not equipped with modern machinery and sufficient qualified staff. The technology was quite complex and expensive. In 1932, only 2 of the planned enterprises managed to master it. Armor production plants. Both the Zhdanov and Mariupol factories. And even there, the defect rate exceeded all reasonable limits. They were not managing to meet the production plans. In Zhora, they completed 1/3 of the plan, and in Mariupol, less than 1/4. Moreover, problems emerged at the tank assembly plant. Guitar-organic armor turned out to be very sensitive to welding. They warped due to the thermal effects of welding. At the edges of the parts, cracks appeared, and the welded seams chipped off. Nevertheless, it was from this material that the hulls of the T-28 tank were made. But, ultimately, they decided to abandon cemented homogeneous in favor of rolled homogeneous armor with high hardness, which could successfully replace it. The Zhor factory was the first to switch to it. The Pi model Branium received the hull of the T-26 tank. However, to maintain the armor's strength, the sheets had to be made 2-3 mm thicker. As a result, the tank gained an extra 800 kilograms of weight. But under mass production conditions, this was justified. The main achievement of Soviet metallurgists was the creation of the 8th armor in Mariupol. At first, that was named M32. It was cheaper and much better at withstanding and contain. Moreover, it was possible to achieve a perfect balance of hardness and toughness so that it provided the required level of protection. And it was exactly this that was used for the manufacture of the T-34. It seemed that one could stop at this point. However, cast armor proved to be very convenient for production of turrets and some complex-shaped hull parts. Unlike rolled armor, it does not require complex equipment for production, and the process is faster, which was military time is very important. Moreover, casting allows manufacturing parts with variable thickness, which is very important for differentiated armor. For example, the same towers. Therefore, rolled armor was used for the hulls, while the turrets gradually were converted to cast armor. This is how the cast turrets of the 1934 models looked. German industry was more advanced, and at the beginning, they focused on homogeneous armor with a surface by hardening. All their tanks, up to the T-34 model, were assembled from this armor. However, wartime also became very problematic for them. Guitar-organic armor became scarce. The Panzer R initially had only hardened frontal armor plates. Later, it was entirely made from homogeneous rolled armor. The Panther initially already had homogeneous armor, and only the upper and lower frontal hull plates. Later, this excess was completely abandoned. Both Tigers received homogeneous rolled armor. The Germans never really took to cast armor. It was used sparingly, mainly on the mantlets of complex shape duct. As for the chemical composition, the Germans made a focus on the extensive use of alloying additives. High hardness and at the same time toughness were provided by magnesium, chromium, molybdenum, vanadium, and manganese. By 1942, molybdenum had already run out. Then nickel started to be used instead of it. After a few years, due to a shortage, they abandoned it, and then, abandoned vanadium. They could still achieve hardness, but the toughness dropped critically. The quality of German armor sharply declined. It became brittle. Soviet armor originally contained less carbon and was alloyed quite economically. after a detailed study of German armored steels. Specialists from WWII 48 noted that there is basically nothing to adopt from the Germans. There is basically nothing to adopt. Achieving high armor resistance by using scarce and expensive alloying additives does not pose any problems. To obtain the desired characteristics, Soviet metallurgists took a somewhat different path. This is an improvement in the production technology, that is, adjusting the entire cycle mode from smelting and rolling to quenching and tempering. This measure was more of a forced one. When the situation with non-ferrous metals normalized, heavy tanks started to be produced more durably, without problems. Steel with increased amounts of nickel, chromium, and molybdenum. And so, a question naturally arises for my viewers. Like Volodya, progressive armor obviously rolled too, but whose armor was better, ours or the Germans? I nay, but friends, you can't answer this question quickly. If the topic of tank armor interests you, I will definitely talk about it in my upcoming videos. You won't miss them if you subscribe to my channel. That's all for today. Please like it if you enjoyed it. Please share your opinion on what makes the armor better in the comments. And as usual, you know best who to send this video to. Bye.